This blog is thankfully hosted by Kuba Szreder, a writer and curator of a Free Slow University, but also part of critical practice, so also in different fields involved. And I'm very thankful because the idea that in this camp has to be, besides all the other topics, that we also, of course, have to look at our own situation and focus on that was very early, and there were already some people invited and so on, and then Kuba took it over and gave it a shape and invited some other people and so on. So not a very thankful job, even the more I'm very thankful that you do it, and leave it to you. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Hello. So as you know, it is a session indeed about art, labor and politics. What you can see here is empty chairs are not even symbolic but physical signs of the negativity of labor. If they were prepared for panelists, but basically as we are 20, but basically, except my dear friends from Free Slow University, all the others rather preferred to be out of the scope. And it's a bit of kind of heat here from the light, so it's not such an easy thing to stand in a spot. Anyway, before we start, let me just say a couple of thank yous. I will try to be as concrete in them as possible. For this reason, I read them, and it will take a while, but I hope that you will bear with me. Before I say ritualistic thank you to the organizers, I would like to thank at first all those workers and engineers who manufactured the mic through which I speak and PA system through which my voice is projected. Well, no worries, there is going to be plenty of thank yous, so keep your clapping, but Thank you to the anonymous workers of China who assembled my laptop on which I wrote all those thank yous. And possibly they also produced the majority of things needed to transfer and print it. Well, if we are going to be like this, definitely there won't be time for any discussion. So thank you thank you also to the communities of programmers who wrote and tested the software that was used in those operations. I would like to thank woodcutters, carpenters, metal workers, welders, drillers, crane operators, architects and constructors who designed and built the stage and the building in which we are. Thank you to the textile workers from Mauritius, Morocco, Spain, Bangladesh and Poland. You made the clothes I wear. Thank you to people working in agriculture. The fruits of your enormous toil feed us all on a daily basis, enabling me to write and say all those thank yous with a comfort of filled belly. Thank you to the caterers and cooks here at the marathon. Thank to you, after those days in Graz, I feel much more healthy, if anything else. Thank you to the hotel staff where I stay. Thank you to drivers who drove me to and from the airport, airline staff, baggage handlers, customs officers, pilots, technical staff of 3 airports who made sure that my ass was safely processed from Warsaw to Graz. Not to mention engineers and workers whose continuous toil was necessary to construct and all the other marvels of infrastructure that enable us to be here and now, coming from all our spatially dispersed locations. At this moment, I should also say a couple of more controversial thank yous to the workers of oil industry for a relatively cheap oil that obviously makes it possible for us all to travel so extensively. Now I'm going to be a bit more personal. Thank you to my mom, who labored so much to bring me to this world. I tell you, it was not an easy task, neither for her nor for me. And who together with my dad fed me when I could not, fed on myself, have educated and supported me since my birth till now. Together with other members of family, you were there when I needed you. Thank you to all the educators, of course mainly female, who since I was 3 have continuously tried to discipline me. It was not a sympathetic task. Thank you to all the doctors and medical personnel, of course mainly female, who managed to keep me in a relatively good health. I will definitely count on your talents and services in the future. Thank you to all my friends, past and present, with whom I have had endless discussions, exchanges and quarrels. Without you, I would not have thought to address all these issues that I do mention here. Thank you to all my collaborators, to Marsha, to Neil, to Janek, to Michał, to Karen, to Method, to Agnieszka, Christian, Bogna, Szymon, Mel, Vlad, Viviana. Some of you are here today with us, and I am honored that I had a chance to work with you. Only thanks to our continuous critical exchange, I'm here today and have anything sensible to say. Thanks to all the strangers, for all the small talks and chit-chats, for the inspirations, for the insights and irritations that provided such a nourishment for thought. Thanks to all the authors that I have ever read, performers I have seen, artists whose works I watched. Without your thoughts, my thoughts would not have been formulated. Eventually, thank you, Florian. Are you still here? You have not only invited me here, but your curatorial guidance and attentive control helped to shape this panel. Thank you to Kirsten, Cornelia, Dominic, and all the other technicians, assistants, and support staff of steirischer herbst. As only thanks to your long and intensive involvement, we are all here. Thank you to all those who I have forgotten to thank, and whose labor enables my intellectual creation. I hope that you will excuse me for not mentioning you. At the end, let me say thank you to the Marathon PS. I have entirely enjoyed all the insights, exchanges, and conversations that we have had in the last couple of days. I also wanted to thank you, directly you, our publics, for your patience in listening to all those thank yous, this is first thing, but also and especially for your generosity and attention, as you make our work possible and presence legitimate. And of course, last but not least, thank you also to all the participants who agreed to take part in a panel. Thank you. Okay, so this is the end of thank yous. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that this is not the end of the thank yous in general, because I was going to thank you all in person. But still, some of you possibly wonder what all those thank yous mean, whether it is a prank or some kind of like weird thing. Well, on top of expressing my gratitude, I just wanted to demonstrate you on our own concrete example how complex is a division of labor that penetrates and enables our intellectual creation. Obviously, we all know it, more or less. Its presence is as obvious and transparent as air that we breathe. But the question of the division of labor in relation to art, and particularly in relation to leftist art, is like an elephant in the room. We are afraid to touch it, fearing that it will start to move and shake, so that our carefully constructed universe will crumble like a card house. I do not want to use the infamous C word, so will not talk too much about class issues. Still not getting into the C analysis, what interests us here is the complex composition of art and labor. We are going to map the relations of positions, trace the flows, articulate antagonisms and alliances that penetrate the art field and shape its relations with the outside social context. When I was preparing this panel, I asked myself and participants a couple of questions. And first one was, is art, or more generally cultural or intellectual creativity or cultural and intellectual production, a form of work? Is it labor? If it is, what are the labor conditions of cultural producers and internal divisions of labor in the art field, between artists, curators, assistants, dealers, technicians, managers, users, hobbyists, just to name few? And what kind of relations link them? Of antagonism, of some kind of exploitation, or maybe of a creative cooperation? There is an obvious difference between the one who meditates about the physical impossibility of death in the mind of somebody living, the one who signs 115 version of a dead shark, and the one who has to gut all those poor animals and place them in a formalin. If cultural production at the other side is not work, then what it is? Is it a vocation, a self-fulfillment, the promise of the land, greener, warmer, flowing with milk and honey, inhabited by multitudes of creative slackers? Is it the exception of a capitalistic world of industrialized labor, of alienated toil? Or is it maybe the new normal of precarious carrot labor, in which the vocational promise serves as a disciplinary tool? And at the end, even if it is a form of refusal of labor, as avant-gardes would like us to believe, of this type of useless activity, driven by a purposeless purpose, unnecessary from the point of individual biological survival, then the question remains: who works so that somebody else does not have to? Otherwise, what is the position of cultural producers in the social division of labor? So this is, I think, a kind of field on which we are going to move. We will see how it actually unfolds in always different presentations, but we are going to kind of have a chance to listen to today. Basically, just an organizational remark. In the next 3 hours, we are going to present you 7 positions, some of them more theoretical, some based on political practice, all of them somehow transversal. We divided the panel in 3 sub-sessions. After each, there will be a time for discussion. So if you have any questions, please go for it. And of course, maybe the last more remark is that it's really a shame that the session of creative strike happened yesterday and not other way around. Well, the milk is already spilled, but I think that it's just anyway important to express my kind of particular feeling but, of sort of regret of this unfortunate coincidence. Okay, I'm just heading to my own time. So, Hans? One more thing. If you feel like, being close or something, I guess that you do not because you sit where you sit, but if you feel like taking a stage and taking a kind of seats of absent laborers, you can easily do it. But I thought it's not so comfortable here, so I do not really encourage you to make it. So, Hans, thank you, and please start with your presentation. And of course, I forgot my duty with all these thank yous. Hans Abbing, if you did not read his bio, is a visual artist, economist, sociologist, and emeritus professor of the University of Amsterdam. He has done research on the economic situation of artists for over 2 decades. He's the author of the book, Why Are Artists Poor? Any troubles here?
Yes. Can you read it? Okay. Do you like it? Yeah, most people like it? Okay. I like it and I don't like it. Because, yes, I'm an artist. This does not mean I will work for free. Yes, that I like. Not having to pay my bills, well, that's self-evident, so we could leave it out. Thank you for understanding. Well, in spite of all Kuba's thank yous, I think that shouldn't be added because offering a service could, Kuba also paid his taxi driver. He may thank him, but he paid, so it was an exchange. And so if we offer a service or we sell an object or painting, it's just normal transaction and we should be paid even and not having to ask, oh, thank you for understanding. So that's one thing. I have to get this thing going. Just a minute. Where is she? This is strange. Okay. It seems I have to do it differently. I don't know why I haven't having a problem. Let's see.
But are you using the right computer?
Yeah, no, I have 2 different systems. Okay. Come on. Anyway, before starting, I have to make a remark. Okay, yeah, it's working this way. So there are 2 preliminary remarks I have to make. This is about artists, yeah? And that's a very large group containing many, many different people. And in general, artists are not rich, they're also not successful, they're poor. If they're miserable, that's not a question. It's quite well possible that the average artist is not very lucky. He may well feel like a failure because he's poor, because he's mediocre. A mediocre lawyer gets lots of money and can still feel great, but an artist, it's problematic. The average artist is no activist. It's good to realize in this company, and the average artist does not make contemporary art, and also in 10 years, the average artist will not make contemporary art. Well, contemporary art is perfect, nothing wrong with it, but it's a genre, yeah? Keep it in mind. Okay. I don't know what's the problem with my... Oh, let's see if... Yeah, it's starting to work. Then we go to the next slide, which I'm going to pass by because we can always return to it. This is just an example a Dutch example, but it's pretty representative. I've seen many reports, it's about visual artists. 40% of Dutch visual artists cannot cover their costs. Yeah? So they're far from making a living. You could even turn it around. They pay to work as an artist. Well, you have to ask who is an artist, who is not. But in other countries, there's similar research, but other definitions of who is an artist and not, and you get more or less the same outcomes. Okay, then artists have second jobs, yeah, or whether you call it a second job or not. They have other income, but the income from work, and 40% of artists have an income from work which is below the poverty line. So artists are poor. Okay, let's see what I got here. What I'm interested in is inner art world exploitation, as I call it. There's also exploitation from outside, but don't forget the possibility of exploitation within art worlds. And to put it in, sketch it down, it's very much related with this notion, everything for art. Whether you call it sacred art or autonomous art or whatever, art is very important, and it's of a different importance than in the case of lawyers' law is. Everything for art, and it leads to an everything goes. Yeah? And that's quite important, because the next step is done, then there is a Wild West economy in the arts, as I would say. There's extreme competition, but we cover it up. And we do so for the notion of art for art's sake, or everything for art. And then we shouldn't forget that this phenomenon, of course, exists in the for-profit sectors of the art world, but it also exists in the non-profit sectors of the art world, where you wouldn't expect it, and that makes it even, in a way, worse. Non-profits cover up commerce, and I would say they exploit artists. They may not do it deliberately, but it works out that way. They pay, some of them, well, quite a few, they pay ridiculously low fees or no fees at all, for instance, art institutions. It may even be negative when they let the artist pay for all transport or all sorts of preparations. And of course, artists have more costs. They have to prepare for a longer time, they have to invest, and they don't get payment for all that. There are many more examples in the non-profit sphere. You probably know all these competitions for prizes. That's more pop world, but also in classical music, there are continuously competitions for honorable prizes, and nobody gets any money apart from the winner. Charity events, auctions. Artists are always expected to bring in their work. They don't get any compensation, and it's natural, everything for art, so also for charity. Fringe festivals, they're very sympathetic, of course, but they don't pay. And in a way, harm official festivals, who do pay. So inner art worlds, competition which works out, the most sympathetic can also be the worst. Interns, we mentioned them in other contexts, of course, they are everywhere exploited, but maybe they're even more exploited in the cultural sector and the arts sector. Okay, and now the problem is artists go along. So they let themselves be exploited, if you want to say it that way. It's sort of an unhappy alliance between the employers, the ones who give you the contracts, and the artists who are happy to work for them. A festival may say, the artist may say, if you have us at your festival, you don't have to pay us, or, you can pay us, but pay us less, and then have a nicer stage. So there's sort of negotiating. We offer our fee to have a nicer stage, all for art. Or the festival may say, if you pay us less, you can, if we pay you less, you can have a nice stage. So it works both ways. Okay, this is... so I would say non-profits who hardly pay artists harm those non-profits who do pay properly. So it's, you may not like the term unfair competition, but it's maybe all competition is unfair in your view, but this is more unfair. Artists willing to work for low or negative incomes harm those artists who refuse to work for very low incomes. It's very simple. Okay. For profits. Well, yes, we don't have to disagree on that. I think the major exploitation of artists comes from for-profits, especially on the top of the pyramid. There's ruthless forms of exploitation, yeah? But also outside the art world, cultural industries, they pay their graphic designers, maybe not that much, but they pay, yeah? And then when an artist is asked to offer to do some job, he gets much less, yeah? Because it's art, and again, the same mechanism. Private consumers, of course, profit from low prices of paintings. I think the majority of artworks are sold for less than their cost price. Again, there's the top of the pyramid, completely different story, but we're talking about the average artist. Why is this going so slow? I don't know what's the matter with my computer. Okay, let's see. Now I would say that an art world establishment profits from the low incomes of artists. And that is partly financial. Yeah? First, an art world establishment. It's successful artists. It's the people in the major institutions, yeah? the big operas, etc. But it's also politicians who associate with art, who are actually part of the establishment. Some art lovers, art collectors, who all profit from the high esteem of art. And those profits, so they're partly financial, but they're also very much in the form of status. And poverty is essential for this kind of profit. The mythology of the arts must go on to keep art sacred. So the high status depends on the maintenance of art sacredness, and this again needs poverty. Okay. Now I want to talk about standards of proper behavior. You could even call it business standards of proper behavior. Among the majority of for-profits, which have more or other goals than just art, sometimes, I'm not talking about the top, but the small companies, they have standards of proper behavior. Not everything goes. Take small publishers. I don't know, there may be differences per country, but in the Netherlands they pay 10%. Even if a writer comes to them and says, I will do it for free, or I will pay you. Yeah? Many authors will probably be prepared to pay. The publisher says, no, this we don't do. There may be exceptions, but if they find out, this one publisher will be shamed. Yeah? So that's a business standard. Even dealers have it. In an art fair, artists are not supposed to take a risk in they're present in the stall. Yeah? So the dealer takes the risk, and if he doesn't, he again is shamed. Okay, let's go on. So how can we install standards of proper behavior among a few more, among non-profits? Certification is very important. Yeah? W.A.G.E is going to talk about that. Art leaks, we've come across them. And of course, there's the workers' brigade who will present themselves here. And again, the mechanism is shaming. Yeah? Then how to install them with, I'm going to the wrong way. Installing standards of proper behavior among artists, because maybe that's even more important. An artist who says, I'm not willing to work for less than so much money. And that is primarily a matter of art education. Now we have these extra curricula, where you get some business competencies, but it's all very separate. As long as the main teacher body continues to say, oh, it's all for art for art's sake, nothing will change. Of course, then there's the possibility of unionizing, which is still a bit problematic at the moment. And then, you can have flexible organizations, collective, etc. And again, I think you should shame artists who are willing to work for no income, but we can talk about it. Okay, I don't have time to talk about the ways commerce is covered up. by galleries, by artists, and in our connection, if I get a collector on in my studio, we talk a lot about art, about my art, how wonderful art is, and it's only in 10 minutes we make the deal. There's a lot of business going on, very down to earth, but we separate it completely. Okay. And so again, in a way, it's the bad and the good guys who come together. So I have no time to talk about it, but it's really about commerce. We put commerce down in the art world. It's a bad thing, and the top does it by covering it up. Yeah, it's not about commerce, and in fact, it's very much about commerce. But we pretend it's all about art, and the bottom, or we reject commerce. It's bad. It's got to do with capitalism. And so there is a strange alliance of the top and the bottom, and we just go on exploiting ourselves. This is, okay, you can read it. Yeah, I can talk about this in the fact, if you don't only serve your autonomy, but if you have multiple objections, whether it's political, whether it's getting recognition, making money, maybe you could even get a better artwork, yeah? The creativity may be enhanced if you're not sticking to this one goal. Okay, that was it.
Thank you, Hans. Just from this very short presentation, we could have had the whole conference, I guess. There are such a lot of controversies, but I'm pretty sure that there will be a lot of ideas kind of like recurrently coming back. And now I will basically, we organize it in this way, but now we will have another presentation by Blumenstein. Ellen, please. And then we will have a discussion. So please hold your questions, and then just in 15 minutes you will be able to discuss both Hans's and Ellen's presentation. So Ellen Blumenstein, currently designated as the chief curator of KW Institute for Contemporary Art in Berlin, founded Salon Populaire, Space for Cultural Exchange, and with the platform Haben und Brauchen engaged with Berlin's cultural and political reality. Ellen, the floor is yours.
Can I ask one question first? How is the structure supposed to be? Are we growing more and more on the panel, or are we discussing all together then after the presentations, or?
No, basically we have structured for 2 times 15, and then we have 20 minutes discussion after your presentation, and then there are going to be next discussion.
But do we have a general discussion all together?
No.
No. Okay.
I mean, we have a constantly general discussion all together. That's why I wanted everybody to sit here, but well.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. I find it a bit strange, because if everybody leaves the stage after talking, we won't start talking together. So. No, well, but that's why I'm asking, as the presentations go on, then maybe it makes sense we all stay here, so then we can address each other and not just talk.
It's mainly because the acoustics are very bad there. So
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure that even people who sit there in first row, like our absent labor, will still ask questions and take active part in the discussion. So let's move on.
Yeah, okay. So
You have kind of funny slide now.
Unfortunately, I haven't been here yesterday for the strike discussion, because as you might hear, I'm a little bit sick and I spent the time in bed, unfortunately. But I have heard a little bit about it, so I thought I might, without having participated in the discussion, try to add or to throw a couple of ideas or remarks into that as well. So I decided to split the short presentation I'm doing into 2 parts. One is to introduce you briefly to Haben and Brauchen and to what we are doing. And second, to talk a little bit about the ideas that we are discussing and throw points of discussion into the space, and I hope you will take them up later or respond directly or whatever. Haben und Brauchen, to have and to need in English, was basically, it was just a title of one event or of one open discussion that I organized together with Florian Wüst, who is an artist and a film curator in Berlin, as a reaction to a very concrete project, which was called the Achievement Show, which was initiated by the Berlin Senate, or by the cultural senator and mayor, Klaus Wowereit, in 2010, as the Achievement Show of young artists. And it was the first, and they spent 1.6 million euros on that, where, just for you as a comparison, the overall budget for funding of visual arts in the city is 4 million euros per year. So I think that was it was a symptomatic culmination point, and what happened is, out of that first discussion, where which we organized at Salon Populaire, which is as Kuba said, is an event and discussion platform in Berlin. 200 people showed up. And it was people both from the organizers, from institutions, from artists and other cultural practitioners. So we had kind of co-arranged this before. It was a little bit really like organized to have a lot of different people there. And it became so intense that a big discussion, a broader discussion out of that evening started. We wrote an open letter to the mayor protesting or like demanding a change, or like even a cancellation of that project, and demanding a dialogue on cultural politics, because that culmination point was basically the convergence of a moment when finally city politics discovered art as a field or as an important sector in Berlin, which is kind of 15 years too late, maybe, or so. But at the same time started trying to market it, of course. And at that point, it kind of crossed with living and working conditions for artists who had been kind of dreamlike for the last 2 decades in Berlin, started to become not only slightly but dramatically more difficult, which still isn't comparable to any other city like London or New York, but compared to the income you might acquire in Berlin, it was still very, it's still really substantial. So just to make a long story short, out of this, Haben and Brauchen title of one discussion became an initiative. We managed to collect 2,500 signatures to this open letter. The whole this like achievement show was changed in many significant ways, but it still happened, of course. It was also very successful in many ways, and then the big question was what happens after. And it was very clear that nobody wanted to become an organization or a union or become a lobby structure or so. But at the same time, it still exists as like a kind of a loose platform where I would say 10 to 15 people are kind of communicating regularly, 40 people are in the loop, and if we would organize something bigger, it's probably 200 people who are closely connected and much broader audiences who pay attention to what's happening. So at the same time, Haben and Brauchen has stayed the partner or the organization to address from the side of politics, as now actually really things are moving. And for example, the Berlin Cultural Senate is trying to organize a discussion platform where the needs, or where the different participants in the Berlin art context are invited to communicate about something like a development plan for the visual arts. We're not very confident in which direction this is taking, but this is really like the practical side of it. At the same time, so kind of we do practical lobby work, but as many of you might know, this is very exhausting. You always do it like apart from your other stuff. And it's also not really what we kind of, it's difficult to translate this into English, wo wir Lust drauf haben, something we really desire to do, or like what we feel like, what we want to do, or that's fun to do. Definitely lobby work is not fun for me. So a very big other part of Haben and Brauchen is the ambivalence of talking and of not being sure of what we actually want. And for a while I was very defensive about this, but I think now that it's a quality, because what we are doing is basically discussing a lot amongst each other and also communicating to others on the outside what things like artistic labor are, what the economy, what the logic of economy means for us, what the concrete situation in Berlin is, what the role and the function of art for society is, etc. And what we just decided, what we would like to do is to open the blog to become a platform for this, for a collection of knowledge, because different people feel the desire to do certain things, and we are collecting those as a very idiosyncratic but focused platform to collect things that we think are important to discuss or understand better for ourselves. So in a way it's totally dysfunctional and not, and it's very ambivalent and not, and it doesn't have a very clear character, but it apparently, and of course it's not as visible anymore as it was when we collected so many signatures, and then the press was very disappointed that we didn't maintain this energy level, etc. I mean, very obviously, how would we? So what I would just spend, or what I would throw into discussion now is a couple of things that we discuss amongst each other in terms of art and in terms of labor. And I would like to speak a bit more general about what we actually understand under the term of labor, or also how we understand labor in general and how we understand our labor. And I would say that, and then like the labor, and then which function art should take over in a society today.
5 minutes.
Yeah, easy. So I would say art, labor is helping us, in a very general sense, is helping us to make sense out of our lives. So beyond artistic labor, labor is a thing that connects us to others, that allows us to communicate, that allows us to have a position or a place in society. And of course, it's a very common notion, or it's a very established term, the society, die Arbeitsgesellschaft, the society of labor. And the French sociologist André Gortz proposed to replace the society of labor by the society of, God, I don't know this in English, die Tätigkeitsgesellschaft, the society of activities. And I find this. I find it very important and interesting to think about it, because we today, we cannot imagine not to work. And I mean, Adrienne will come and talk about the basic general income, which I find, for example, much more important to discuss than fees for artists, because I think the question is a much bigger one. But if we think about what it would mean, so also like, for example, free time, leisure time, is always only the opposite of labor. So we cannot imagine, we cannot relate to the world in different ways, in other ways than relating through labor and defining ourselves also as artists and as cultural producers. So if we would think about what that would mean for us also, to change from a notion of a society of labor to a society of activities, which means every single citizen has to think about what it is actually that one desires, what one wants to do, how one wants to produce sense for oneself to be in the world. Then the question of what we artists are facing is, what kind of work do we want to produce? Do we produce works, objects, or is it a social activity, etc., becomes a question for everyone. And I think that changes the society much more fundamentally than just discussing in which way we understand labor. It's if we ask for the notion or for the sense of what labor actually means for us. And then the second part for the function that art has for society, or that the function that is taking over or could be taking over in I must say my Western society, the Western societies I'm living in, of course this is different in others, is first I would say that art is so attractive, and I think that connects to what you were saying, Hans, that it is until now the only, one of the very few societal fields which is not entirely economized, meaning there are different parameters that construct relevance or that are responsible for the satisfaction we get from what we are doing. So that means it's not only making money. Money is one thing because we need it to survive, but it's about fulfillment, it's about communication, it's a pleasure of understanding ourselves, of being social, etc., etc. So I think with the Bologna process, it's changing drastically, but one of the other fields would be the university, where thinking or a different way of communicating to each other and to the world is kind of a field or free space that is not entirely functioning in the logic of economy. And at the same time, art is the place that allows a society to think about itself, to reflect upon itself. And this is, of course, why Western societies understand themselves as cultural societies or societies of culture, and why they are funding art and culture. And that brings us to sum this up, and maybe in the discussion we can talk about the idea of the universal prostitution of Pierre Kozłowski and the living currency, which I find is a very interesting concept, but to talk about desire and exchanging desires. Once we might, as an utopian thought, what happens if we have gotten over the question of money to make our living, is that art is at the same time the place where we can ask those questions, something we are doing at the moment about art and making sense of our lives and about money in a way of what I was saying. It's the place where society can reflect on itself and can reflect about the mechanisms under which it's functioning. But at the same time, it's the place that produces sense where we might be able to, or what I said about the space that is not entirely economized, that is a space that allows us to go beyond the question of how to make money. So I think in a way this is kind of a double bind, or is a contradiction in itself, which is productive, I think, as a contradiction, that it's a possibility to speak about money and labor, but at the same time it can and should be the place to go beyond that. Thank you. And I have a couple of short versions of the manifesto we wrote with Haben and Brauchen. I forgot to say that. That was one of the things we did. And I just put them somewhere, so whoever wants to take one is invited.
Okay, so we have 20 minutes of actually, of course, general discussion, but everybody, not only the first row, is very welcome to take part in it. If you are actually feeling like getting a bit closer and taking closer part in the discussion, of course, welcome to take these seats. Talking about space for discussion, but anyway, I think that there were like so many very interesting, productive contradictions, because obviously you are saying quite conflictual things, or at least that's how I imagine it. According to Hans, we should be ashamed of working for free. According to you, we should be proud of it. Or actually, we should at least treat it as some sort of like, maybe it's not about working for free, not getting money, but at least working in a field in which all the intentions or all the activities are not entirely economized, so that they are, if I got it right.
Well, I would say I changed the plane a little bit to kind of not only yes. I mean, I don't have to repeat in what I agree what Hans said. So I decided to step beyond the question of how to be paid, to ask a question of why are we here? Or why are we doing what we are doing? And it is part, I think, of what you left out, what you're also speaking about.
Yeah, and of course, you're right, the attraction of the arts, the huge attraction even, is partly in this strange status, the sacred art, etc., but it is also in fulfillment, in being, having this idea that you can be authentic. But yet nowadays, almost everybody can be authentic in between brackets, so if that's still going to work so much. But being exploited is also part of an economy, And resisting exploitation, you need collectives. You also need to get together and have some form of solidarity. So in that sense, we are not so far from one another. The only thing is maybe you're a bit more utopian. I would say, well, this is what we can do today. Let's start. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I don't know how you perceived it.
Yeah, exactly. Because I really want to open, Michał, I think that you already had a comment.
If you please, I think it would be relevant for both of the speakers, but it's more directly addressed to Hans. A simple, your description of how artists are exploited is quite convincing, and we share it, I think, well, because you taught us to. But then the question is, any other worker, apart from artistic workers, supposedly wouldn't ever invest more money in his work than the return he gets. He simply wouldn't go to work then. What's the drive and a desire that puts so many people to be artists despite of that?
Well, it's a bit what you talked about, what I acknowledge. There is indeed a need for authenticity, and it appears that as an artist you could be authentic, give more of yourself. It's still some old-fashioned form of expressionism, but still, it's still also in contemporary art, the signature still matters. And something is missing in our society. And of course, now everybody can be authentic, but capitalism sees to it that the horizon all the time shifts, so you have to continue, and maybe that's partly still the attraction of the arts. But I can imagine that the arts will become less attractive, and maybe that's a good sign. But for the time being, no, maybe we have to be more consistent in demanding some form of payment. It doesn't always have to be monetary, but just recognition and just these vague, good intentions, that's not enough.
I just want to give one observation. I think to be artist today is the most dignified way to be poor. It allows you that people don't ask you stupid question about what are you doing, what are you doing in life. You can say, oh, I'm working on a project, I'm about an application to finish. So it is the best way, and even, in Berlin, everybody can be quite openly poor. Yeah. But try to be that in another city in Germany, saying, I have no labor. So then you are an outcast. But the moment you say, I'm an artist, you are free of stupid remarks.
But that's very telling. Most poor people are ashamed of their poverty, and they're supposed to be ashamed of their poverty. We want them to be ashamed, and then we can be nice to them, like all the beggars here in the street, in the streets of Graz. Poverty is a bad thing. It doesn't have goodness. Only in the case of artists we make an exception, and then again I would say we make this exception because it befits the whole system of exploitation. So I think you artists should rethink the romantics of being poor.
I have a question for Ellen, here at the back. As a newly appointed director of a leading art institution, I'm curious if you found that there is a need or a possibility to structurally change any of the financial considerations and arrangements in terms of the relations of the institution with artists.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the acoustics is really bad.
But can we simply switch on the PA here, because obviously we do not hear what happens. No, but we just. Yeah, I know, because it's just only the point of acoustics here.
Yeah, it was actually beautifully put. I don't know if I can repeat it, but let's try. Let me rephrase. No, I mean, so I want to congratulate you, for your new appointment as a director and leader of an important art institution, and just wondering if you have any plans in this field of, in terms of, financial relations between institutions and artists, if you feel anything should be changed, can be changed, and maybe also a word about the difference between artists who perform and artists who make objects, in this sense.
Yeah, Hans, it's already, they switched on the PA.
A good point, of course. Well, I'm going to an institution that is poor too. So, having said that, it means I do finally have an income for a couple of years, but I don't have production money. But it's just not an answer to your question. It's just a prelude. Of course, this is maybe I can take a little round, like I can start from a different angle. What I think is, I think you're right in a way. I'm much more utopian. I'm always more in. I'm putting my arguments into what kind of space we are projecting ourselves into, and I am a curator. I'm not an artist, so I do get fees, even if small, right, normally. I think everybody, all we who participate in the field of art have certain responsibilities that are according to the position we are taking in this field. And me taking over, I'm not the director, by the way, I'm a chief curator, so there is kind of, I have the programming responsibility, but not the managing responsibility. But that, of course, means for me going to an institution now after having been freelance for 8 years, and always having been a freelancer actually before, means I'm taking the responsibility of that position very seriously, and do hope and am working on also finding out how they look like, my responsibilities. I think, of course, it's a matter of how to collaborate with artists, how to produce programs, in which way ever, if it's be it exhibitions, be it public programs, be it performative productions, whatever. But also, I think a lot about my responsibility towards towards being a doorman, in a way, a guard at the door of this institution for the public, of what can an institution of art provide for an audience, for the practitioners, and for being that space in a society where maybe also other people could kind of get a sense of what it can be to think through art. So both the means of production and the production of content is for me a really important question that is part of my work.
I have a question for Hans. Did I read correctly that you think we should be shaming artists who work for free?
Yes, to a degree. I would say, anyway, I would say to somebody who is working for free or for a negative income, what are your goals? Are you achieving your goals? It could be a starting artist who needs some time to get his aims realized. But after a while, I think that should be temporary. After a while, you should ask him, well, are you achieving your goals? And if the goals are achieved, but without money, it's a problem for me. I can imagine that a person who makes wonderful art, very important art, could still say, I'm an amateur who makes very good art and is appreciated as such. So, but that's again a bit utopian, because at the moment it's not like that an amateur can receive much respect. But I can imagine that. So I do think that you should put some minimum where we at least have to earn some money.
Do you kind of imagine some sort of a peer policing kind of? I'm just because what I'm hearing from you is that, guess what? If you're failing, I'm also going to shame you.
No. No, I think you're right to ask. I don't think we should start have a police like that. Although in the art academies, in the art schooling, there could become already vested an attitude. It's not good to just let it go or whatever.
But Hans, first of all, I have one general remark, because we have this kind of realistic utopian kind of perspective, and I don't think that this is actually right. I wouldn't say that your perspective is more realistic than Ellen's. It's just that you take it from a completely different position, and kind of also take a bit kind of like categories from all this kind of general economy, and then assume that they are the universal ones and kind of have to be directly kind of attributed to the art field. Like, then we can also ask about different types of labor in which emotional component is important, like emotional labor. Or like, care work and so on. Is this kind of dream of the kind of economization of every aspect of life? Is it what we are actually heading here in what you are saying? I guess not, because you are...
No, it's not. You have to keep in mind a market economy needs cooperation, needs rules. Yeah? A market economy is not the same as capitalism. Capitalism, at times needs a market economy, but at times goes against the market. Yeah, wants monopolies, wants state power so it goes up and down. So the two are a bit related, but not all together. And so if you have little entrepreneurs and they can work together or not, can form collectives, but as long as they're not big firms, they have to have certain rules in the things you don't do. Like these publishers, they're not going to pay less than 10%, and in the things you do. And that's quite normal.
But may I comment as an artist, or kind of confess? Actually, one of the few proofs, because we are heavy institutionalized, and actually, for me to legitimize certain things, it means that I'm doing outside of monetary subjugation. So that is very crucial. Sometimes I get completely paranoid that all my activities kind of colonized by that kind of broad term of economic relation and protocols that are really permanently the main things. Of course, it's different positions. But if you reach a certain position of visibility, then the line of escape, it was discussed here. It's actually escaping of that monetarization of relations. And that is very crucial things. No. Because it's not about kind of, romantic, as you said, claim to authenticity of the poor artist must be poor, artist must be beautiful, and blah, blah, blah. Not at all. It's really, for example, in that discussion of autonomy of art. Autonomy means, like in Atomia Operari, it's claiming the power of labor force, living labor, outside of subjugation to the roles of the capital. And I think it's really crucial things.
I respect that very much. But it's a statement you're making. Yeah? By moving outside, you make a statement, and an artistic statement, and some way or another you found finances to do it. But that's not the art world. You're a segment of the art world of people who are doing that. I'm talking about the average artist, and then I think this whole notion of autonomy and sorry?
What is an average artist?
He is describing structures, not
he's the artist who is working for free and then getting like living under poverty line, and this is, I guess, what is Kant's main, the main argument. Because we had this discussion for a couple of times. The main argument, the main interesting argument, is that the poverty in arts basically supports methodology of arts. Methodology of arts support a kind of like symbolic economy of arts, and at the end it is profitable only for art elites. This is a kind of crack of his argument. And I think then, if you think about it from this position, then I think it becomes really problematic. You know how it is, but that people are working for free and the others are shown off in binary, and everybody names it in the name of the art autonomy. And this refusal of economization, which comes on the top of the hierarchy, is extreme. You know, maybe now it's a bit waning, but still, it used to be extreme. But art is not, labor is not money, is everything else. But of course, these are the same guys whose paintings are at auctions and so on, so on. So it's, I would say that this is a crack.
Yeah.
Sorry, we have still maybe 2 more questions.
Well, I think in a panel or in a marathon that deals with art and politics, such a blaming to make artists ashamed that they work for free is really dangerous in times of crisis. I can talk about Spain. So right now the situation is not very funny in Spain. And to work for free, I'm coming from an institutional part, I'm a curator. So even I work for free a lot. And it's more a fight for existence. And it's not so much that you don't put value in the art, it's more to just fight that art exists in time of crisis. So I think it's super dangerous just to blame artists, because that makes the valor of people who fight in these times, they like shrinks the value.
Yeah.
Can I say?
Okay.
Can I say something to this? I think that's not his point. Maybe I totally misinterpret you, but
you have a good advocate. In the future you need to. If you have a bit of money, and
no, the question
to spend
is
it on something
like
sensible.
Something that we are talking about, or that is being described through you. Or in my words, I would say the double bind is the artist has an exceptional state, which in the society, which makes it so attractive for us all. And at the same time, the price for that is the artist is the only one who's not being paid. But that's kind of intrinsically connected to that exceptional state. I am, as a curator, I am being paid, and I can easily claim to be paid, even if then it's just 100 euros, which doesn't make my living. But it's a kind of different steps of also what you said. The designer is being paid, the installment team is being paid, the artist is not being paid. But that's a structural connection that is a double bind and in which is part of the system. What you pay for being an artist and being recognized as such is narcissist. It has a narcissist part. You get recognition, you get the attention. You are not me. You are the figure around which the whole art system is centered. But at the same time, this means it becomes part of its logic that for you being the king or queen inside of this is you don't get paid. This is not fair or moralist or whatever. This is a logic of the system.
Okay, just one very, very short comment, because we have to proceed, and then there will be still, please, if you have any other comments, please have them in mind, and definitely same topics are going to reappear in the next discussion. So please.
No, just very short question or comment to Hans. On one hand, I of course agree with your statement, but on the other hand, if we take into account this kind of actions like Pussy Riot, for example, that we cannot determine if, the spheres of experiment or the spheres that you have to ask yourself, is this art, or the spheres that are challenging us and are not legitimized as art, how you approach this situation?
Yes, I would say, anyway, you don't have to, should pin me down on this shaming notion of artists who work for free, but because that's not my main issue. It's a mentality which has to change through the schools, etc. But your point, yes, and the interesting thing with Pussy Riot is that they are also operating within the cultural industries. They have a video clip. They may be in an early stage, but after a while they may even earn money, and they're political. Well, I think that's great. And the absence of pop music, popular culture in this meeting, in this conference, could even be a bit telling about, still high art. Okay.
Okay, surely thank you very much for your inputs. Thank all your laborious attention and input. So it's like it looks a bit like a kind of a chain production in a manufacturer that we have to proceed like 15 minutes. Turn the lights down. Can we dim a light a bit? But you mean here or there? But just slightly, because I guess that we do not want to fall asleep after 7 days of marathon. It's going to be maybe a bit harder to. Okay, so let me introduce my colleagues from Free University of Warsaw, Michał Kozłowski and Janek Sowa. We work together, as I said, in Free University of Warsaw. So please proceed.
Thank you, Kuba. Very quickly, I'll just say in one sentence what we do as a collective. We basically make conferences, workshops, summer camps, and publish some. Well, but we work very hard on the labor camps. All right.
No, I did not. No, sorry, I did not do labor camp. Maybe.
Yeah, well, it depends. Sometimes it's sort of volatile essence of it. And the outline of, I'll just present a very short outline of what is our approach and what we're interested in. And in very general terms, what we want to do is kind of a mapping that we would like to call a political economy of art. In this concept, we of course refer to Marxian concept of critique of political economy. As we remember, the critique of political economy consisted of two essential elements or moments. The first one was about reconstructing the conditions of the possibility for capitalism, but not the transcendental ones or universal ones, but rather social and historical ones. In fact, the critique consists largely precisely in demonstrating that the transcendental conditions are historical and social. The second moment, however, was of a strategic character. I mean, so the conditions of possibility that Marx described for capitalism were not only to be described precisely, but they were to be overcome. Sorry. I don't think that for a moment we don't put ourselves in such an ambitious. We don't give ourselves such an ambitious target, but we hope certainly that our work would enhance critical and, more importantly, maybe sometimes self-critical attitude with the actors of the field of art. And what is quite important, I think, here, that we believe that art is not just artificial supplement to the real social and material play of forces. It is the place where at least some of the social and political stakes reach an extraordinarily high degree of density. This political economy would consider both the division of labor, division of power, capital, within the field of art, as well as the place which art occupies in a larger perspective of contemporary capitalism as a system of production and exchange. It concerns its modes of accumulation, its modes of cultural and material reproduction. And what we understand by this political economy of art is not a thesis, it's rather the realm. 4 territories that I sort of outlined, I think you'll be more or less agreeing with me on that. The first thing that is very essential about art today is the problem that we have with the theory of value. Because since our good old Marxist and classical liberal laboristic theory of value was never very operational on the one hand. On the other hand, we see with the current crisis, but not only, with the previous sort of boom even more, we see that also the scarcity theory of value or supply and demand theory of value don't really account for an understanding of what's happening. So it's worth taking a closer look at art and its specific modes of making value. The second one is, of course, the essential question of artistic mode of production, because some sociologists claim that at least in some, perhaps ideological ways, it is being extended to other fields of society, but in a very perverted way. So as Boltanski stated it, the sort of rearranging of the managerial structure, tactics and strategies in new capitalism were very often a response to what he called artistic critique. So, so the claim for more autonomy, more satisfaction, claim for more hierarchy, more individuality, to some extent more equality. But of course, this perverted managerial response was rather spreading ideology of creativity as a new principle of management of desire and management of labor. The third aspect is very general. It's rather political aesthetics, as we know from the analysis of Pierre Bourdieu. Art, bourgeois modern art, has played an important role in cultural reproduction of the ruling classes. On the other hand, we would have completely different accounts, like this one of Jacques Rancière, who believes that art is actually performing emancipatory function despite of itself even, not really wanting it or willing it. And most of all, one never should arrogantly dismiss critical aspirations of actors, even if they are artists. So I think it's worse. And of course, the fourth big question, I'll be very brief, the fourth big question is the question of authorship, attribution, copyright and property, that in art we are more visible than anywhere else, but they're essential to all capitalism today. And these are just the outlines. I haven't put or highlighted any thesis here. Our collective doesn't have common. We have common approach, but we don't have common hypothesis to explain things. We know, as Chairman Mao has stated, that liberalism is very harmful in a collective. It is extremely bad tendency, but at the same time, we are well aware, as Mao added 20 years later, that one cannot advance without mistakes. It is necessary to make mistakes, and the party cannot be educated without learning from mistakes. Go ahead.
I would like to just add some terms to the discussion we're having. I'm going to say some things that probably some of you would not believe in. Maybe you will, I don't know. But I would like to stress this thing that Hans Abbing said at the beginning of his presentation, that we are here not representative of artists, cultural producers, whatever you call it, right? So whatever I'm going to say is, well, first of all, I would say applies to a sociologically understood or defined average, the same term that Hans used. And also, it's rather descriptive than normative. And as you will see, we do not agree between ourselves, so maybe I'm going to have a discussion with my comrades here. So I would like to distance my view from this comparison of art and labor, saying that artistic producer, cultural producer, artist is a worker. I would say that activity in this field, I would say cultural production in general, can be understood much better as a hybrid position of entrepreneur and a rentier. Entrepreneur, I know you hate this word. I hate it as well. This is a neoliberal disciplinary tool. It's not only that I hate the neoliberal view, I think it's profoundly wrong. Because the neoliberals, they understand this entrepreneurship in purely material and monetary terms even. And we had this discussion during this panel before, why people engage in this activity when they don't get any money or they don't get enough money. I would say they do get some benefits, but they get paid in a different currency. It's a currency of, I would say, accumulating a symbolic capital and a social capital. If you take a look at the map that W.A.G.E. Arikan did. This is, for every sociologist, I'm a sociologist, this is a map of social capital, its distribution, and the most important nodes in the network. So I would say what a cultural producer is doing a sort of entrepreneurial activity, but in a field of, in a symbolic space, right? So this is also why we had, Michał mentioned this summer camps. Last year we had a summer camp and Carrot Workers Collective participated in it. I remember I had a discussion with Valeria on this. Maybe she's going to somehow comment. You have this question, how much of your time is paid and how much is unpaid of your activity, of your work? I think I cannot really say. Because the way it works is that the things that I do for free get me to do things that I'm paid for. In this sense, the time that I spend working for free is not a work, it's an investment that gets a return later. So this is a purely entrepreneurial model. Again, I'm saying this in a descriptive way and not normative way, right? This is not a neoliberal disciplination, you should all become small businesses, and I don't mean it in purely material terms. And then the second, I would say, part of this hybrid, a rentier. And this is something that we explored a lot in the work of Wrocław University, is the whole question of authorship. I think what really distances a cultural producer from a worker in service or in traditional industries is the fact that we develop brands in a way, right? Because we have our name, we sign our activities with this name, and this really gets us somewhere, it somehow advances our career, right? And this is not at all the case of a worker. Kuba mentioned this Chinese worker who assembled our computers. They would not get, invited to work on more assembly lines just because they assembled computers for us, right? But we would be invited to do some things in the future because we did something here, we signed it with our names, so we develop a certain visible identity. And I would say that the profits we somehow get from it, this is a profit of a rentier, right? Who has got a certain property, it's an immaterial intellectual property, and who can somehow get some sorts of benefits. Again, this can be benefits taken in a material way, understood in a material way, but also a symbolic benefits. So, conclusion. I think we should we should not talk about art and labor, but we should rather say art versus labor.
Okay, we have it on the table. Minor compositions. Please, hold your breath and ask questions in 15 minutes. You want to speak from there? Or maybe it will be nicer if you actually face the people who...
Switch.
So how was it? Steven Shukaitis, aka Hobby Horse? Was it a Hobby Horse? How your nickname?
That works.
Okay, so just Steven Shukaitis is a lecturer at the University of Essex and a member of the Autonomedia editorial collective. Since 2009, he has edited Minor Compositions, a research theorizing and publishing project. Joanna Figiel is a doctoral student researching issues of free labor in internships as well as precarity within the creative sector. She is a member of the University for Strategic Optimism and the Precarious Workers Brigade, but today here you are more like a minor composition. Not you are a minor composition, as a representative of minor composition. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks. Can you hear me okay? So me and Steven are here to present Metropolitan Factory, and it is an ongoing survey / research project that we have been working in the past year almost. And it's a survey, it's a short questionnaire that you can find online on our blog, I guess, Metropolitan Factory. And it's a survey looking into conditions of creative and cultural labor, production, artist work, however you want to call it, maybe, in this way. And in a sense, it kind of fits in with a number of other surveys and investigations that people are currently working on who are also here. So there's the W.A.G.E survey in New York that we're going to hear about later on, and there's the UKK survey in Copenhagen. Those are the young Danish artists, Young Danish Artists Organization or Association, who have recently done a survey of conditions of work of their members. And there's a brand new ops designer survey in Italy and in the UK. So they're all sort of looking at the same thing, maybe from different angles. And our survey is less concerned with quantitative data, but more about qualitative look at matters of work and life, and more specifically individual strategies in the sort of like micropolitics of work within the broadly understood creative and cultural sectors. So it's more about people's personal individual experiences of managing their life and their work. So maybe in this sense it can fit together with the other surveys and attempts to kind of make give a larger, broader picture of the issue. So in the survey, we're interested about how individual artists, culture producers, but also educators, assistants, and so on, hold together the different demands of paying the rent and their bills while managing their practice, projects, activities, activism, and all that. So the kind of material conditions, rather than the more abstract, considerations of the field. So we are interested in the ways in which work of these people is organized by themselves and by others, and especially for freelancers and those working within collectives where there is little distinction between who is planning the work and who is managing the work, and those people who are executing the work. So all these lines become very blurred. And at the same time, we think it means that often the passionate and self-motivated labor of the artist, the culture producer, becomes a model then for sort of self-disciplining, self-managing of the labor force that we are ourselves. So with the survey, we tried to get some sense about how creative workers manage these different competing tensions and demands and contradictions that come out of juggling different types of work. So in the questionnaire, we tried to get a sense of what kind of language also people use to describe the practices through which they make a living, and how would they describe themselves, the different types of work that they do, the sort of structures within they operate and how they navigate them. So whether they work on their own or as part of a collective, whether they have any managers, or maybe they manage others, whether they ever work for free or hire people to work for free, and also physical considerations of work. So when you've got sort of freelancers or creative producers who work on various projects in different places, sometimes at the same time, how do they physically organize their work, and where is it that work or labor happens? And also the sort of blurring distinctions between, well, not just work time and free time, but also the spaces in which that happens, and the sort of, how to say it, difficulties that come along with the sort of constant self-management of oneself and one's time, and strategies for survival, as well as sort of future sustainability of their practices. So the sort of different themes that emerged so far, and the project is still ongoing, so we haven't really looked at the findings as such yet, or have collated them in any way. But the sort of themes that emerge have to do with the sort of the bureaucracy of everyday life, and maybe aesthetics of self-administration, this whole idea of performing tasks that some people wouldn't consider as part of their practice, maybe feeding into the art and culture, artistic and cultural practices, so sort of constant communication, administration, answering emails and things as such, becoming part of the practice. And time management and self-time management, the sort of, like maybe in relation to Janek was saying, the sort of in-between time disappearing or maybe becoming work. And then all the different types of time, work, leisure, family, care, time, merging all together. And the questions about valuing one's work, and time and output and production, or outcomes of production, but at the same time self-valuing, so things like self-esteem and feelings of doubt, worthlessness even, depression, all the sort of negative things. And I don't know, I guess I'll pass on to you. I just say that the sort of format of their survey kind of draws on the long history of workers' inquiry. Yeah, you can talk a bit more about that.
Okay. This particular project begins with taking a walk, in particular walking around East London and being intrigued by spaces like Brick Lane, where you have, let's say, you have the Truman Brewery, and you have this large factory space, which now serves during the week as a car park, and on the weekend as a sort of arts market and cultural market where different kinds of cultural producers and people selling their wares and doing various things, and becoming, this is not a new story. There's a long, at least 50-year tradition of former industrial spaces becoming new spaces of cultural regeneration. And so what interested me just walking around looking at this is that for years I'd been following all the debates around immaterial labor, and I had this, you get this expectation that since immaterial labor was inherently cooperative and had all these great potentials, clearly the sort of filling of the former factory space with all sorts of new immaterial work would mean that any second now Brick Lane was going to become a communist utopia. And I waited a few months. It didn't happen. I was very disappointed. So I was trying to understand, well, okay, what does that mean? How do we make sense of it? I'm being a bit glib here, but so I was interested on how the former factory space as a bounded workplace started to become a site where these, let's say, flows of creativity, imagination, working flowed through, but were not necessarily just connected to. And so what I think is interesting about that is I'm not so sure that the economy of the arts is exceptional. Or maybe it was exceptional at one point, but I don't think it is anymore. What I find interesting about an arts and cultural economy is the way that it creates certain kinds of a subjective relationship to work where you're so invested in it, you can't think of yourself outside of that work. You can see this in teaching. I work at a business school, and management loves art workers because they're so willing to keep working. They can't think of stopping. Actually, the sort of grant that was used for this project, I wrote on a day that I was supposed to be on strike. There was a 2-day, 1-day stoppages, work stoppages in the UK around pensions. And so it's like, oh, I can stop working. What should I do? I know, write more grants. So this high degree of sort of subjective investment where you can't separate yourself from your work or think about any alternative. I mean, to put it a different way, there's another sort of position of who is the invented worker who will work 24 hours a day on a form of labor that's unpaid and it invests one sense of self. Well, you might call that, the housewife, right? And you could see parallels between struggles around domestic labor and pay for domestic labor in the 70s in a similar way in that there's such a subjective investment. It was difficult to think outside it. So the idea of going back to workers' inquiry, which starts as a practice coming in Italy in the 1950s, but is much broader than that, is trying to understand how these particular forms of working and compositions of work operate. And so these sort of, it's trying to use sociological tools, but not just as sort of, let's say, descriptive tools, but as a way to understand what kinds of political antagonism are possible based upon forms of work that you're involved in. So in sort of autonomous language, you would say that this is the sort of relationship between technical composition or the kinds of skills involved in a work process and political composition, or the kinds of politics that are made possible based upon that work process. And so the reason why we're engaged in this project is we're trying to understand, let's say, the inherent radical potential of artistic labor, but more the blockages. What stops or prevents people who are engaged in artistic labor from moving beyond this high subjective personal investment to talk about collective conditions? So if we would go back to the discussion of the creative strike yesterday, it would be to ask what stops the idea of a creative strike or an art strike being possible. Is this such a deep investment of the self that in order to actually talk about going on strike, you'd have to talk about putting down yourself that's created through that investment. In a certain sense, I think it's interesting to go back to the history of the art strike, and there's various iterations, at least in the 80s version, or late 80s, early 90s version, for its sort of attempt to sort of get rid of the idea of the artist as a blockage to talking about labor conditions. And so I don't think there's any sort of definitive outcomes of the project we're working on so far, but I think that's where we're looking to end up, is sort of thinking about how these personal and subjective investments in work block off talking about the conditions that it happens in, and trying to hold together, thinking about, let's say, ways to refuse certain kinds of onerous labor with bringing back to creating other conditions. So we sort of a bridging between refusal as in withdrawing from work and using the other energies to create different forms of relating. Okay, I'll end up there.
Thank you. Oh, I didn't even have to say that I open floor to questions, and I see the hands rising. So obviously there is a lot of. Maybe you can, because there are mics.
Thanks a lot for this kind of shift of discourse from a discourse that says we have to look at the art economy, the art field, as if it would be possible to look at the art field, the economy, the actors in the art as artists, or whoever, kind of separated from what's going on in contemporary capitalism. And I'm not, I don't want to put it traditionally as a critique of capitalism like 19th century. I think we have to look at the changes of the 20th and now the 21st century. And of course there things like creative labor being something which is transversal through the very diverse social fields comes up. And then my question, more or less to minor compositions, but maybe to all of you, is what kind of methodologies can we develop? I didn't really get your methodology concerning the workers' inquiry. Of course, if we take the 50s operaist version of it, it was still kind of identifying a certain subject, the worker in the factory, going to him or her, to him mostly, and then finding out what is maybe the revolutionary aspects in it also. Now, of course, that's like 60 years ago. And of course, you might refer to people like Precarious a la deriva in Madrid and other places in Spain that try to take into account the shifts, also the geographical shifts, and try to find out methodologies which were more moving along and not identifying the subject that you are researching. So I didn't get it what you did concerning this problem.
Well, okay, so first of all, this is one of the problems, I guess, that we find working as creatives or cultural workers and trying to organize, and I don't know if you were there at the panel yesterday, but one of the problems obviously is, the sort of, the amount of time and work and effort people in precarious conditions, not just in the arts and culture sector, experience, you know, and that already makes for a workforce that it's overworked and sort of atomized, and there isn't a workplace really in many cases that people interact. So yeah, it's not as easy as going into a factory and approaching people working there. But so the sort of subjects that we address the survey at are mostly, obviously it's all anonymized, but you know, it goes out to networks and networks of people that we know and work with, organize with, are friends with, within these kind of sectors. And I guess that's kind of also interested in terms of the findings of the survey, which will come soon, that, you know, the ways that people self-identify, because we don't, because of the fact that, you know, it goes out to a membership of a certain group, or maybe a membership of a arts organization like it did in Denmark, you know, we don't predetermine, so it kind of is also up to the respondents to put themselves into categories, you know, and a lot of them will not write that they are an artist, they will write all sorts of other things, describing their multiple sort of engagements. Does that answer kind of?
I would just add one quick thing, is I would agree with you that sort of the history of workerism does to some degree remain attached to a certain kind of Leninism, where you have to identify the sort of, you know, the subject at a certain point of production, and then based upon that from production you have a certain kind of politics. That's not the goal here. The goal is to let's say, what's that phrase Spinoza uses? Like, nobody knows what a body can do. I think here is actually realizing that certain forms of the conjunction of art and labor can do less than you might have thought. But that's not a bad thing. It's actually saying what kind of composition of forces are in the situation. And then from that, try to think what kind of politics could be based upon those forces, rather than trying to find a sort of a highest point or whatever. It's more saying, well, what's here, how does it work?
I have a question to you, because I must say I'm much less interested in methodologies, and I feel like we are talking about a lot of things that is common sense amongst us here. I mean, this is all people, we all know what we are talking about, so I would like to give a question to that you posed to Hans and bring it back or rephrase it to you. When you were describing the artist or artistic production as a hybrid, or like as an entrepreneur in a way, what do you think, what is the aim of it, or why are these strategies applied? Why are artists doing it? What is the reward? Why are we doing this?
I think you should, for sure, you would have to go into a sort of libidinal economy. It's the kind of return you get is not material, but you get a sort of enjoyment from it.
Janek,
right?
can you speak closer to the microphone?
Yeah. So I would say you get pain in enjoyment. That's and so of course you have that's why it's so easy to manipulate, right? Well, it is a recognition, but it's not actually for most of the artists that Hans is talking about. It's not recognition because they are not recognized, right? They have a fantasy of recognition. Yeah. So for sure, they think. Look at the importance of the myths of Rembrandt. At the end of his life, he was painting in dark colors because he didn't have money to buy any other paint, right? But still, he was a great painter, just not recognized. Or the myth of Van Gogh, right? That he died poor and he was not recognized by his peers, but he was a great painter. So there is more, I would say, a fantasy of a recognition that compensates for this lack of recognition and lack of material success than a recognition in itself.
Yeah, can I just
sure.
go on with this directly, and then I pass on to you? I'm asking this because I exactly wanted to go in that direction, because I think the libidinous level or plane in this is a really important one, and something I didn't mention, or I didn't manage to mention before, is this. There is this the narcissist and the recognition level of doing what we are doing, but at the same time, it's also an insistence of doing something that goes beyond, like a direct and mere fulfillment of very easy or very direct desires, because that's what I said with maintaining or kind of insisting on different logics of producing sense, which go beyond economic logic. So I think there's always like this twofold structure, which is very much about desires and lust and wishes, but it's also about producing something which goes beyond your own body and connects you to somebody else outside.
Well, I would say very briefly, I mean, yes and no, because we gathered here, we are not representative in any way of what is the mainstream or the average of the cultural production, right? So as Hans pointed out, most artists are not activists. For somebody who has a cause, who is, thinks of herself also as an activist, not purely as a cultural producer, going beyond a mere activity that you're doing is very important. However, I would say not for others necessarily. And I would also very briefly, I don't think enjoyment has to be narcissistic. That's not what I meant. That this is narcissism. This is enjoyment, but not necessarily an artistic enjoyment. Narcissistic enjoyment. Sorry.
Hans.
I'll be very short. I think I'm an economist, but I think that you and even you are thinking far too much in terms as if you were an economist. I think you're.
Great to hear this from an economist.
You use the word investment, yeah, which presupposes that you have a long horizon, that you think, well, yes, now I'm investing, but in due time I'll get returns, whatever form, in enjoyment or what. It doesn't work that way. People go for it. They make short-term decisions. They think, yeah, I'll inherit the earth or whatever. And it's always short time. And that's also why after a while, well, they can't change their course anymore, but they may very well be unhappy. A choice, yeah, takes you on a course which is not very happy. So it's the term investment, I think, doesn't work.
If I may just comment on that, I think it's very much right that we have quite often projecting this rational subject into, and people like a bit differently. But referring to your question about methodology, because actually we didn't mention it, but we also do a sister survey to your survey, but it's not developed yet. But we face the same problem linked to it, I think, a bit. We don't know if you want to get a hard empirical research or something like Konričerka genre. Do we want put a subject in a difficult position so that he or she has to define herself in this game, which is not an innocent game? So this is simply.
If I can just briefly reply to this investment thing, I guess it doesn't have to be conscious. I mean, we are structurally put in a situation. Look, how many times we have this situation when we are invited to take part in a, I don't know, exhibition, conference, something, and we are almost like expresses verbis told, we are not going to pay you, but this is prestigious, right? And this is the structural, and we all face this kind of situation. This is the kind of investment relationship, right? So it doesn't have to be a direct choice that I make, right? It's just that I'm put structurally in this situation when I function as an investor, right? I do prestigious things for free because later I would be invited to deliver a talk and I would be paid $500 or 500 euros, right? So this is.
Okay, we have. The next question, because
it's just a quick remark, but I've heard this on several panels. Is the way the notion of economy has been used in a very simplistic way, as far as I understand, as the economy, as the neoliberal economy, but that's often not being said. And I think if people imagine a world without economy, then I would like to hear what that would be. And otherwise, I think it might make sense to be a bit more specific when we talk about economy, what we mean by that. It's just a little remark.
Can we really call artistic labor reproductive labor? Because I see what you're saying. Like, I see the connections between, and this was mentioned yesterday as well, the connections between those two things. But is artistic labor, can we consider that to be related to reproductive labor? And if we can, what are the potential discontents of that, I guess is what my question is.
I wouldn't say they're the same thing, but I guess I was suggesting through a degree of residence in the conditions, and particularly in terms of where high degree of a subjective investment or subjective involvement is used to sort of legitimize the conditions. So I'm not saying that the same thing. I'm saying that there's, let's say, connections that I think could be fruitfully teased out.
Sorry, can you speak to the microphone? Because I guess we will... No.
No, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, but then there's this potential, if we're also thinking about our artists as entrepreneurial subjects. I know there's maybe an element of choice. Like if we think about reproductive labor as being, there's an identified subject there, right? In terms of like women's reproductive labor or et cetera. So I guess what I'm saying is that I see the connection that you're making, but can we really, like what's potentially displaced by the, like relating those two? Do you see what I mean?
Okay, so one last question, and we just need to follow with the schedule.
Yes, thank you. It's rather a comment and perhaps not really a question.
Sure.
The point that I have to make is that now that we talk about free labor and labor in precarious conditions, it's not only a symptom that is existent in artistic fields. So what I'm saying is that perhaps looking into how these symptoms are equally the same way happening in other fields of work, and that comes from my own experience because I've been in precarious working conditions in both as a cultural producer but also not as a cultural producer. So what I'm saying is that if we address it in a broader terms, then perhaps it would gain a bigger, like the argument would have a bigger social attention, and and perhaps it would be easier to find methodologies how to fight that. If you only put it into the artistic labor problematics, then you strip it away from the like raising awareness in the broader social terms, because free labor or precarious condition labor is a matter of labor exploitation. And it happens not only in the artistic fields, and perhaps it would get more attention if it were addressed like that.
Yeah, but is it a good? Yeah, but if it is a short comment, then let's go for it. If it is not, maybe you can keep it for because I'm pretty sure that precisely this question will be mentioned in the whole next part of the session about like precarity as not only condition of the art labor and of the different types of conditions that actually perpetuate the whole society. What actually Gerald mentioned somehow in the beginning. I guess that here we are asking this panel, of course, it's a recurring question about the exceptional status of art. Is it not? Is it? If it is, what are the changes of this exceptional status, which obviously was there somehow in the past? In a current situation in which certain models, as Stephen was explaining, is also about models of explaining behaviors of people who are, as we artists, how do they correspond with different types of strategies and kind of like tactics that other people who are not necessarily parts of the art field choose. But this is my understanding of this. So, quick comment?
Well, just a quick comment and then I can elaborate on it later, but just speaking from the very concrete experiences we have with this To Have and To Need movement in Berlin, of course we do address the questions in a larger social scale. We ask which other fields of labor are not paid well and why is that so, and we try to analyze. But trying to combine this with a question about artistic labor conditions and sitting in front of politicians, real time, being asked, what are your, what do you work on, what are your wishes, and what are your realistic demands? 3 minutes, yeah? And then you have to set a few realistic demands. Of course, we elaborate on a perspective in which condition our society is. We elaborate on the strong need for an unconditioned basic income, things like that. In 3 minutes, being asked by a real politician to say what the art scene in Berlin needs, you end up discussing honorars paid by Berlin-run institutions or things like that. So the levels of discussion are really hard to negotiate sometimes, yeah, the dimensions, let's call it, not the levels. And I think they are always there. Ideally, they are there. Both dimensions are there, but in different situations, you can only bring in a productive way one of them, I guess, while still relating to the other.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. And now we just follow on with the last sub-session of this session. I'm pretty sure that, as I said, there will be plenty of questions reappearing, and also about economy and the kind of simplistic or not simplistic vision of the economy of subjectivity. I think it's also very important here. So first, let me introduce Adrienne Goehler. Adrienne, is everything fine with the presentation?
Well, can I have only one? Is there one who is able to deal with that, please?
Can we just have a bit of technical help with this PowerPoint thing? Can we? Or somebody who knows a bit about Mac?
Hello, is there any technical assistance, please?
What is the problem?
Okay, but somebody will find it.
Great. So, so Adrienne Goehler is an independent publicist and curator and former Berlin Senator for Science, Research and the Arts, advocating an unconditional basic income, which actually just in a second ago was already mentioned.
It shows you the next one, so you know. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for having me here. Before I go to the basic income grant, which is for me a vision and not an utopia. First of all, because utopia means always non-place, and it takes part in, or it is part of the life of Alaska, and it took part in a tiny village in Namibia for 2 years. So I just want to show you what I'm doing today, because of course I think that that artists are working, and they are more working in W.A.G.E, and they are also more producers than they are laborers, but still, this is the I'm running since September 2010 an exhibition that is touring, because I have a sharp critique, on the acceleration of the art consumerism. I mean, you just get paid for a little, you have a little project, then you can show it in theater 3 times, then next. Then you have to apply for a brand new thing. This is unsustainable, this is hostile to any art production. So I'm seeking for heterotopias and not for utopias, how Foucault calls it, and I'm deeply concerned, and also I'm deeply convinced that we need new vessels for art production, which is much more social relevant than it used to be like 20 years ago, because I'm surrounded of artists who work in schools, in hospitals, with kids, and in environmental issues, and I'm also very convinced that we will manage the huge ecological problems we have only with the input of the arts, but I want to have it paid, this input, and not make it for nice or free. So I have developed, and I had some examples, but they are already gone, a concept for establishing a fund for aesthetics and sustainability, as I understood that in the art context you are not paid if you're dealing with ecological problems, and of course all the very rich and wealthy foundations in the ecological or environmental sector, they will not give you money because you are artists. So we need to have vessels, new foundations, and we don't need foundations who are only nationally working. And then I give you also a little, this is a little artistic idea to how to overcome our situation. This is an artist from Germany who will have a long-term, long-run project for 43 years. She will transfer every day a cent to the German Federal Bank in order to pay back all the debts we have, and on top of it, with 108 characters, she transfers every day the Kapital von Karl Marx. Then another proposal from an artist, how to deal, we need another currency, and the currency is time. And an example why we need so urgently a foundation that is directed or who sympathizes with long-term work. This is a work from a Korean artist, and it's needs, of course, a common or a work together, a collaboration together with the scientists, and there is no money in our normal vessels to support such a collaboration between artists and scientists. Okay, this is goes too far. So I just give you maybe the three steps I like to link. Sustainability needs deceleration, and to be able to decelerate in our hybrid life, we need a basic income grant. You can also say the other way around. The basic income grant enables deceleration, and deceleration enables sustainability. I think one of the crucial questions is, what would you do if your income would be guaranteed? Would you still be an artist because it's so glamorous to be in a certain way poor? Would you do that? That's very interesting for me. There's you know that there is a worldwide initiative. It's called Basic Income Earth Network, dealing with the basic income grant. And it's 2 weeks ago that there was a huge congress in Munich, 150 participants or speakers from 29 countries. This was a nice idea that you are the reason for an income. That would change a lot. And this was the Congress, and this is the book I was writing about, because I really think that the basic income refers a lot to the ideas of the French Revolution, of Freiheit, liberty, equality, and basic income means solidarity. So these are the 4 criteria, and I leave that for the moment. As we obviously live in a traumatic time of a traumatic social transition, of radical change of societies due to everything we know, the radical changes that affects indeed also the possible role of artists and freelance academics, which I'm always thinking together. I claim that artists and academics, cultural and social creatives are more experienced in dealing with the uncertitude of open contexts of liquid modernity, as Zygmunt Bauman characterized our present. It is the nature of artistic and academic practice to deal with errors, doubts, rejections, to combine and recombine, to sample and to mix. A practice which is needed for all cultural and democratic development of our societies. Artists and freelance scientists are the avant-garde of the precarious living and have a lead in the future shape of work. When 19th and 20th centuries might be characterized as centuries of institutionalized work and structures, the 21st century stands for project-based work and fluid structures. A study from Berlin Center of Sciences shows that artistic labor has by now become a model that can be generalized for future ways of working and living, defined by the end of the 9-to-5 jobs, so the abolition of work and leisure, the difference between work and leisure, sometimes better, sometimes less paid, the work alone or in the team, often from home, with enormous individual input and self-management. This is the vision for the 21st century working spaces. The permanent, chronicle existential fear, if the next project will come, which is the biggest threat to all creativity, will be the regular companion of most labor. So it is the time to remember philosopher Hannah Arendt, who said, "The privilege of the human being is to call something new into the world." And the big is such a new call in the world, the basic income grant, the big, is such a new call in the world, even if its origins go back to Thomas More's Utopia. The basic income grant seems to me one of the most exciting visions to transform not only developing countries, but also Western welfare states into cultural-based societies, as in the end, the big is not only an adequate mean to fight back poverty, but it is mainly a cultural and democratic impulse as it refers to the individual that is enabled to take responsibility. The guaranteed basic income grant is the most simple and powerful idea of the 21st century, the fundament of a self-transforming society for a society based on culture. And by the way, I find it very interesting that the biggest field research is in a village in Africa, and that we are not transporting it. I mean, we learn from Africa through that. I assume, like most concepts, 3 minutes, I assume like most concepts do for principles, the basic income grant is an individual right, hedges one's existence, you can read it, and it should be high enough to guarantee the participation in the cultural and social life. It is independent from maintenance obligations of spouses, parents, and adult children. What is really a dramatic shift if you look on how our welfare states things is paid. It's a revolution. But it is an anti-victim idea, big. Big gives an individual the freedom to choose between different spheres of his or her life that makes the surplus valley of the society. Big is a synonym for dignity. Big is the right to say no, also to stupid exhibitions, for instance. Big is a matter of human rights. Big helps developing real democracy built on process, as Jennifer Gonzalez yesterday reclaimed, and big is empowerment for self-empowerment, and that maybe then it is art, very good. The activists of the idea expect that once the constraint of work is abolished, when income and labor is separated, multiple coexisting forms of paid labor, caring, future education, social and cultural relevant occupations will be possible. And I will add, it's also the right of idleness, which is so important to the health of our society. Basic income is an aspect of the maintenance, extension, and the democratization of public infrastructure. Basic income stands in the context of the perspective of gender equality that realizes a radical redistribution of socially necessary labor, paid and unpaid, between man and woman. Big is anti-paternalistic. The concept of basic income encourages a development towards sustainability. The French economist and philosopher André Gortz was already quoted today, and I will finish by quoting him. The connection between more and better has been broken. Our needs for many products, and I would add also a lot of art products, and services are already more than equivalently met, and many of our as yet unsatisfied needs will be met not by producing more, but by producing differently, producing other things, or even producing less. This is especially true as regards for needs for air, water, space, silence, beauty, time, and human contact. Here ends the quotes, and I would love to add, this is also true for the arts. Thanks.
Lisa? Yeah, okay. You need more chairs. Yeah, there is one more mic here if you want.
There's one mic here.
Okay, so let me welcome on stage Precarious Workers Brigade. It's a growing, and introduce them. It's a growing, PWB is a growing group of precarious workers in culture and education based in the UK, joining forces to reclaim and demand equal pay, free education, and to advocate shared ownership of space, ideas, and resources. The table is yours, floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're not sleeping. I just wanted to start. We are the Precarious Workers Brigade. Well, there are a few of us here, but we are growing, and there is many of us. Only a few could make it here to Graz. I just wanted to start by saying that our work and our group really stems from a reflection on our own precarious living and working conditions in London. That we've all come together, but we are all also involved in other type of struggles, which are not limited to the art sector. We are not all working in the art sector, although we do find that cultural practices can be useful tools and cultural spaces can be useful platforms to debate political issues. And I just wanted to position that and to say that our practices, our projects, our debates are very much try to reflect our own complicities, our desires, and the ambiguities that we find ourselves having to struggle with in our everyday life.
You'll notice that we're handing out carrots. So we use the carrot as a symbol, both in relation to this kind of stick that dangles in front of you and that you chase constantly in precarity, and this being one of the conditions that we find ourselves in and many other people do also. But we're asking you to kind of just chomp on that carrot and see what it feels like, you know, and maybe if you have the carrot, we can think a little bit differently. But we also would like to ask you to do something together, which is, it would be great if people could just kind of move in so that you actually are sitting beside someone. Turn to the person on your left and have a very brief conversation about the precarious conditions that are in your life or how you understand precarity in your life. So turn to your left, find the person to your left, If there's no one to your left, move over so you have someone to your left. And it's just going to be a couple minutes. It'll be nice. It'll be nice while you're eating, you know, with your mouth full. Just have a quick little chat.
Not sure. Because we have microphones. My microphone is on, so I cannot really chat. Because I will again dominate the whole space.
Can I have this board? I want to write it.
Yeah, sure. You want to write the questions? Yeah. I have my own in my pocket.
That sounds really good.
Can't eat this with my teeth. It's probably going live on here. Guys, what's the time like?
Okay, everyone. So sadly, as in all situations of precarity, time is moving quickly. So we're going to have to move to the next little bit. But it's really nice that you keep talking. And hopefully at the end of the session, there'll be a follow-up. So if you have an interest in taking up some of the ideas and also experiencing the people that you just experienced, after this session, there'll be another session to continue on with issues of precarity. I think we just wanted to say and do this exercise, which is slightly symbolic, and usually we wouldn't have people talk to each other without having a sense of how we could report back and move from there into an organizing process. But today we don't have the time for that until later. But we wanted to just say that as a group, we often depart from questions and not assertions. The questions up on the board being a few of them, although we've worked with many. Questions like, are you unsure how you're going to make a living? Do you freelance but you don't feel free? Are you anxious during the day and sleepless at night? Questions around affect. And has the carrot that you were promised gone off? Once you reach that carrot, does it taste a bit funny? Is it kind of crap? Do you not want to be in this space anyway of this cultural sector? So we came together as a group based on quite a few years of working on this analysis of the carrot and how it functions in our life. And how it functions in our subjectivities and in our desires and affects. And we decided in the moment of the student demonstrations in 2010 in London, more people were talking about this, and there were big mobilizations around identities such as student and teacher, but people who cut across and didn't have very kind of formal or stable positions to those kinds of identifications needed another space to think about what is the political stake in these austerity measures from the position of being a precarious worker. So as a group, we cut across a few different sectors and increasingly more sectors, but many of us work in the arts, in education. Some of the people who we're working with now work in cleaning, in other occupations as well, but we're predominantly within culture and education, I would say. And we, after these mobilizations in 2010, or as part of them, we decided that it would be interesting to try and map what precarity meant. So we had a kind of working definition, but we decided it was much more interesting, like we just did now, to embody the definition in the experiences that people were facing. So we held a tribunal on issues of precarity, inviting people to come and make testimonies. It took about 8 months or so, and we used the tradition of the People's Tribunal, which is a tribunal, a form of tribunal that says the law doesn't work for us. And we want to actually challenge the very basis of the law, which is exploitative. The labor laws don't recognize things like the exploitation of interns or artistic and other forms of precarious labor. So, and then this really brought about thinking about different dimensions of precarity, such as how it affects the body, very concrete working conditions, including the one in which we were presenting the tribunal, which was at the ICA in London, and we exposed the very nature of precarity in relation to our kind of relations with them, which was quite uncomfortable, issues of migration. So we kind of performed this as an act of sort of testimony to our own kind of states of precarity, but also as a way to expand the group and expand the number of people who were working on this issue.
Yeah. Okay. So very briefly, just to say that from that, in a very loose way, several working groups evolved because we are quite a large group, so we worked out that several people feel strong affinities to certain issues, and because we're a mixed group. So we've got a group on working conditions. We'll say a bit more about that. Work on a training for exploitation, which is an alternative arts curriculum. We'll say a bit about that. Marketization and corporatization of the arts, and a broad coalition and a broad sort of range of solidarities. So we'll say a little bit about each one in this very speedy way. So working conditions.
Sorry, we obviously prepared this presentation working very hard, and we are really organized. Okay. So just to talk about a little bit about the tools that we would like to reflect about with whoever is here today. One of the things that we found useful producing, also very painful producing, but it's internship guide, a counter guide to free labor in the arts. We have some copies here, so you're very welcome to get some to bring with you. And so how to talk about this? So I think that the one thing I would like to recommend, though, is that for us at least, it's a cute object, and everybody's got, I don't know, I like to collect fanzines, but the idea is a little bit like in self-help books, is if you don't do it, it doesn't work really, yeah? So, the guide came out of a process which also is important for us to talk about, because it's not, it's not an artistic project, as I said, but it's not also a project that came out for, sorry, I'm really speaking in a bad way today. It's, I forgot what I wanted to say. Yeah, that the guide, it was created working through a series of workshops and encounters with students and interns over a number of 2 years. So I think it was a self-learning process, and also trying to understand what kind of language can be used and mobilized, and what kind of tools can be brought to a discussion that produce more discussions and mobilizes, rather than just relying on academic formats of encountering and so being stuck in the language that comes with analysis. What other registers for analysis can be produced to that? And one of the things was, for instance, to do a collective exercises of anecdotes sharing that would result in photo romances, which are kind of fun to produce, but also they're a good excuse because you have to really reenact the little scenes of humiliations and shame and maybe violence even that many of us have to encounter in work situations. And that gives a good excuse to also talk about how can you do it differently, or how could we not end up there in the precarity zone.
And then a next tool that we've developed, really, that's based on the format of the bust cards, which are handed out at protests, usually with your legal information, is that we've used that format, but we've done something called Bust Your Boss card, which you can see on the screen, but also we're going to pass, we've got some copies, I don't know how many, but we're going to pass them around. Oh, can I? Oh, no, I can read it here. I can just about read it here. Yeah. So I'll just read the first few lines, which is, when you have the right to ask, what's the budget? How much am I getting paid? How much are you getting paid? It's a list of questions that you have the right to ask when you're being commissioned or asked to do something. And on the other side of the card, you've got, during a negotiation about the work, you have the right not to remain silent about money, not to subsidize the production from your own pocket, not to accept a change of agreed conditions without a renegotiation, and not to take this job on the promise of a future. So that's, sorry we're going a bit fast, but it's very limited time. We want to just sort of share as much as we can around the kind of tools that we're using that we hope can be useful also. So the next, just a brief mention of the campaign that we've been researching and collaborating, also trying to collaborate with unions. It's a long story, a bit complicated, but if you're working for free and you're if you're described as a worker, and it's a kind of long description around what constitutes you as a worker. But basically, if you're working for free and you're not a volunteer, you're a worker, you have the right to national minimum wage. And if you have the right to national minimum wage and you've been working for free and you're not being paid, you have the right to actually file a claim. So it's a campaign called the Payback Campaign. There's other groups who are also doing it, like Internaware. So we're working with other groups on that as well. And the idea is, well, our idea was to file a collective claim, but the law is not designed for that. It's very individualized, so there's some struggles to be had around like possible collective claims. So it's not like, again, individualized to one person. Okay, we've got a lot to go through. No, I wasn't talking about training for exploitation.
Going back towards the overlapping in between laboring conditions and educations, reeling towards, because of time, there is also a working group that is looking specifically at how educational patterns contribute to create these conditions of free labor and exploitation. And specifically, we're putting together a curriculum that can be used by art educators in various capacities, and you're welcome to check it out on the webpage or just be in touch if you are in the professions. And also, we are working with placement officers, which are these kind of people that work for universities to find internship opportunities. And this is also quite interesting because, as a phenomenon, because increasingly privatized universities brand themselves through granting you the privilege to work for free in very sexy institutions. So that's also a limited access, I would say.
I think one of the things that we've also been working on, we want to work on the issue of conditions, but of course we also want to think about the actual art world that people are entering into, because this is the part about the carrot having gone off. Even if you get waged labor in the arts, it generally sucks. And you generally have to work with assholes, and you generally have to work in the company of corporations you don't want to work with governments you don't support, with policies you'd like to evacuate. We all know this. So like when we get the wage, we kind of haven't won because we're in really a shit situation in the arts in general. It really does suck. So we do campaigns also around the way we think the art world might look, or at least how we don't want it to look like. So against the corporatization and also government, different kinds of government involvement. So these little images are actions that we've done with other people in London. One about the government, the Tory government's involvement in curating exhibitions at the Whitechapel. And we called it an image launderer and staged some dirty laundry kind of actions outside, which they didn't like very much. And also we've done some actions with other anti-cuts groups in relation to Sotheby's and its support of tax evaders, because Sotheby's, being a massive art business, also is a tax shelter for many multi-billionaires. So we've worked on those kinds of issues also, and find it very important to not valorize the arts and the wage as the only struggle within the arts. And that sort of links to also thinking about how the art world could look. or not the art world, the cultural field or whatever, this precarious labor, how we might rethink it in relation to solidarities and find kind of comrades and people that we want to work with who do creative work actually in their own campaigns. So one of those campaigns, we've worked with trade unions and other kinds of groups, although we have an uncomfortable relationship with them. But we've had a really nice relationship, I think, with the Latin American Workers, which is a group of predominantly Latin American cleaners in London. And I'll hand that over to...
Yeah, but sorry, we just really need to proceed.
Yeah, it's brief. Basically, in February, the United Kingdom Border Agency started a very systematic attack on the Latin American community in London. The 3rd of February, there was 90 people stopped in a concert. 6 of them were deported by the time we got an email as a call out for action or support. That was 4 days later. So we started working with Lawas because we're interested in their form of working. They have language exchanges to support members of the community. Also, they have a Theatre of the Oppressed group, which also combined with a group of friends of ours, and some people are involved also in another Theatre of the Oppressed group called Implicated Theatre, started workshopping this that you see here, and that you will get something else. It's a migrant bus cart. Basically, we've worked with organizations like No Borders, Stop Deportations, Lawas themselves, and a number of lawyers to check what it is exactly that someone can do to avoid being stopped by the police, because they usually do speculative stops, and what is the best way or the quickest way to get out of prison, which, well, it's prison, it's not a technical, it's called detention center, but it's a prison. So, yeah, we made a design and we worked around this, all this information. We worked it with members from Lawas and ourselves, and we finished with this design that I'm going to hand out in a second.
Okay, and I'm going to just say something to wrap it all up, which is one of our tools that we've been working with since a year. It's kind of transversal across all working groups, which is what we call the ethics code, a kind of draft in progress of both a kind of micro-political navigation tool for us as a group that allows us to discuss and frame and think about how we organize to make sure that we don't waste time, energy, and resources. And it's also a way for us to define how we relate to the outside world, to other groups, to other campaigns, to the art world especially. So just one thing to say about that is that a problem that we've encountered variously as a group that works in the arts sector is that we get tons and tons of invitations to present in places, and we've found ourselves investing a lot of energy into just presenting to people who in any case were already conscious of the issues but not really doing anything about it. And we realized that we needed some kind of framework that would allow us to stop just doing this consciousness raising that kind of took away our energies and didn't allow us to organize. So this ethics code has been a way for us to also become an organizing group and focus our energies in the ways we want. It's online, it's not a goodie that we can hand out to you right now. But if you scroll through it, you'll see that it has a definition of what we want to do as a group, our aims and objectives. It talks about our organizational platforms, communication, things like that. And very importantly, it has a section that defines what invitations we say yes to and what we say no to. Yeah. So you can check it out online.
Okay.
And just if you want to keep having a conversation about this, then join us at 7:30 in the White Box. Is that what it's called? White Box.
Together with Art Leaks.
Together with Art Leaks and many other people. So, and thank you for the opportunity for us to have a week of organizing with other cultural labor groups. It's been really great.
Yeah, sorry that obviously I'm here as an agent enforcing velocity and speed. But yeah, these are the conditions of marathon, but we have very predefined time slot, but we need to squeeze in all these very interesting positions in. So now let me introduce Lise Suskolne from Wage Groups, working artists in the greater economy, which is a New York-based activist group focused on resolving economic inequity between artists and non-profit art institutions. Founded in 2008.
Yes.
Lisa, floor is yours.
That's true, but I need some help here finding the PowerPoint before I can start. Can somebody...
Helping you.
How did you... Okay, hopefully, gosh, it's really hard to wait 2.5 hours to present. And it's really hot in here. I thought I was getting a sunburn sitting over there. Yeah, W.A.G.E was founded in 2008. We're an activist group advocating for the regulated payment of artist fees. It's a super specific platform, and I actually didn't tailor this presentation to outline why it's important for artists to get paid, but after today, I'm kind of thinking maybe I should have explained that, but hopefully it's going to become evident through this presentation and some of the initiatives that W.A.G.E has been engaged with. And I just first want to start by saying W.A.G.E is not an art project, and our work is not art. We're an advocacy and activist group, because in New York, for some reason, people think that our work is art, and we often get invited to do things as artists, and that's really not at all what we do. We're advocating for viable, visible, absolute, transparent, unequivocal, concrete, undeniable systemic change related specifically to nonprofit arts organizations, which includes museums. And I just wanted to, I guess, start by really simplifying this discussion and maybe oversimplifying it for some people's tastes, but I guess the way that W.A.G.E and myself in particular think about remuneration is that compensation starts or is non-negotiable once your work enters the marketplace. So the marketplace includes nonprofit arts organizations. Because the marketplace is obviously, commercial and nonprofit marketplaces are completely intertwined at this point. So W.A.G.E isn't really thinking about, well, we're not taking into consideration the work that was done before you enter into a transactional relationship with an organization. So that simplifies it a lot for us in trying to achieve this very specific goal, which I think represents a larger set of goals. So I'm going to play a jazzy video for you, and then I'm going to bore you into submission with some administrative activism. Let's see here. This is the W.A.G.E manifesto, and this kind of is what formalized W.A.G.E and kind of is what became W.A.G.E's platform. Let's see. Oh God. Okay, I have to show this. So do you guys mind if I go online and go to our website? Okay.
Well, you can try.
I think I know what happened. This happened last time. Okay. Sure, I can advertise our website in the process.
W.A.G.E, working artist and the greater economy. W.A.G.E works to draw attention to economic inequalities that exist in the arts and to resolve them. W.A.G.E has been formed because we, as visual and performance artists and independent curators, provide a workforce. W.A.G.E recognizes the organized irresponsibility of the art market and its supporting institutions, and demands an end of the refusal to pay fees for the work we're asked to provide: preparation, installation, presentation, consultation, exhibition, and reproduction. W.A.G.E refutes the positioning of the artist as a speculator and calls for the remuneration of cultural value in capital value. W.A.G.E believes that the promise of exposure is a liability in a system that denies the value of our labor. As an unpaid labor force within a robust art market from which others profit greatly, W.A.G.E recognizes an inherent exploitation and demands compensation. W.A.G.E calls for an address of the economic inequalities that are prevalent and proactively preventing the art workers' ability to survive within the greater economy. W.A.G.E advocates for developing an environment of mutual respect between artist and institution. We demand payment for making the world more interesting.
Wait, Rachel. All right. I'm glad you guys appreciated that. Now back to the PowerPoint. Sorry. What the heck? Is this it? Sorry. This is okay. Here we go. All right. So for about 2 years, we did mostly consciousness raising around the issue of non-payment. And then we decided to focus on a single achievable goal, and that was in part learning from the Art Workers Coalition, who I don't know if you all are familiar, but we see them as our forefathers. They did activism for 3 years between '68 and '71, and did absolutely amazing work. But in the end, what they ended up with was the Free Day at museums, which is now sponsored by Target. That doesn't discount all their work, but I think we figured that if we focused on one specific and very obviously achievable thing, that we would get more traction. So part of the issue with artist fees, and I can only speak for New York, I know it's a different system here, so I'm really just gonna have to, do that irritating thing and just talk about New York. But the problem with artist fees there, the main problem is that there's no regulation or transparency around the payment of fees. So one of our demands, if you want to call it that, is that artist fees become their own line item in operating budgets. Yes, there it is. A bit distorted. So this is in the States, you have these posters when people go missing. I don't know if you have those here. This is the equivalent of that. So that's the main issue. So one of the main initiatives was the 2010 W.A.G.E survey. Essentially, in embarking on this journey of activism, if you want to call it that, we needed to really find out. The question was, are people getting paid or not? We felt that they weren't, but we wanted to find out definitively. So in 2008, we started working on an artist survey that took 2 years to make, and then about a year to kind of or 2 years to analyze the data. And the most important fact that we came up this is really the most important data that we have out of it. It's complicated. I'm not going to present the survey here right now, but to be able to say unequivocally that almost 60% of artists who answered this survey did not receive any form of compensation, including the coverage of expenses, is just unacceptable. And so we didn't know what we were going to find, and this is what we found. And we're working on. We're reworking the survey to keep it open indefinitely. We want it to kind of just exist online, so once an artist has an exhibition at a nonprofit, they can just dump their data into the survey to tell us whether or not they got paid. And this was another way that this has gotten us into a little bit of hot water. I know you can't read this. Yeah, you definitely can't read it. This is a gradient of about 68 institutions in New York, including a category of other, because there are many, many nonprofits. It's a gradient of institutions that provided full payment to the end for institutions that provided no form of payment. And we, essentially named these institutions. And it wasn't to name and shame, it was just fact, in my mind. So after the survey, during the survey, we started working on this project called W.A.G.E certification. And the idea is that W.A.G.E will certify art institutions that are, the first idea was the institutions would be paying a minimum fee and following a best practices model. And it's a voluntary program, and it's based on this concept of self-regulation. That organizations want to self-regulate. So we're not enforcing anything. Or an organization will come to W.A.G.E and ask us to certify them. And that's kind of what happened. So Artist Space, which is a 40-year-old nonprofit in New York, contacted us about the survey and then said, we want to work with you on this. We want to be certified. And then they proposed a research partnership, which is what we're in the middle of right now. And full disclosure, I'm also the grant writer at Artist Space, so it's kind of a complicated situation, but it's interesting because it provides me with a kind of insight into the way the organization works that enables probably more transparency. So when we released the survey results, we did a presentation. We decided to look at, the time frame for the survey was 2005 to 2010. And so we decided to look at Artist Space's history of payment during that time. And then in relation to what CARFAC recommends, which is in red, but I'm not going to go into that right now because it's just not enough time. But it's just interesting to look at a breakdown of the budget, that artist fees take up they're 1% of the budget. I hear laughter. I'm not sure if... Okay. Yeah, it's funny. It is funny. Yeah, so anyway, how much time do I have, Kuba?
Well, 5 minutes.
Oh my God, okay. All right, I just have to skip over this. But okay, I'm just going to skip this. The reason that W.A.G.E was invited to this festival initially was to W.A.G.E certify steirischer herbst. So we were in the process of developing W.A.G.E certification, so that did not seem to be possible. But in working with the festival, we've been able to actually, and I've been working with Artemis, who's the managing director of the festival, to really look at it's actually been this amazing process of learning for me, because Artemis asked me this really, really pointed, important question in a Skype chat that we had a few months ago, which was, what does equity mean to W.A.G.E? Can you guys read this, or do you want me to read it to you? Maybe I'll just read it out. So I had to articulate that, and I think that was really important. So equity begins with recognizing that the contribution made by cultural producers is integral to the functioning of an art institution. Compensation for this contribution must reflect this value. Value might not be quantifiable in terms of the work done prior to collaborating with an institution, which is what I was mentioning before, but it must be conceived and established in direct relation to what an institution chooses to pay its employees and subcontractors. So what's happening to W.A.G.E certification now is, instead of establishing this kind of, like a fee schedule that has to be grafted onto many, many different kinds of arts organizations, which really didn't seem to be viable. We're starting to think about W.A.G.E certification as looking at the artist fee in relation to to the other expenses that an institution incurs. So, for example, what an institution pays its director. So we're looking at the artist fee, or the payment of a fee, as you're paying an artist essentially as a subcontractor, as a content provider. So in working with Artemis, it's been amazing, because it sort of cracked this issue open for W.A.G.E. And we've been able to kind of establish some criteria for W.A.G.E certification, which is kind of how W.A.G.E functions. We work with institutions, and in doing that, develop a position, but this position is kind of constantly changing in relation to conditions, which I think makes complete sense. But one thing that is not changing is that artist fees must be paid. So these are some, this is in development. So, as I said, one of the demands is that artist fees have to be included as a line item in an annual operating budget. Artist fees cannot be used to cover other expenses, which is really what commonly happens. This is what's I'm finding the most interesting right now, is determining the size of the fee in relation to the size of an operating budget. Because, of course, if there's a small organization that, say, has a budget of $100,000 and another that has $1 million, you couldn't expect the small organization to pay the same size fee as a large one, because it would essentially bankrupt them. So this model is about the relativity between expenses. And I think that the last point here on this page, W.A.G.E certification considers equity not only in relation to the artist fee. The fee is a starting point in looking at the value of all labor within the organization. adjustments to employees' salaries might also be recommended to bring them up to a standard that is equitable to the investment being made in artists or the production of artists' work. So that's to say that an organization may be spending way too much on the production of an artwork and not enough on paying the janitor or not enough on paying its employees. So what's been so interesting is that finally this issue of the fee is kind of like a wedge and is kind of, in my mind, sort of breaking open this whole question of equity within an organization, which is essentially, as Artemis put it today, a frame. It's a frame on a sort of an ecosystem or an economic system within an organization, but it's also a metaphor for a kind of a larger problem. We're not looking at artist fees in isolation. We're looking at them in relation to everything else. Been developing this wage certification intake form, which we ask an organization to fill out when we start wage certification with them, and it's designed to make an institution think about their policy, these are intended as long-form questions and answers. I'm not sure. I know this is just so much text for you to read. How much time do I have? 3 minutes. Okay, I'll get to the certification of the festival. So I'm skipping this, moving on to this. So I thought part of what WAGE does is transparency is like paramount to what we do. So sometimes when we do these talks, we'll either say that we are getting paid to do the talk or we're not getting paid to do the talk. Obviously today, I'm getting paid 250 euros, as is everyone else who's presenting here. But I was interested in looking at the other forms of non-monetary compensation that are occurring at this festival. So as we all have experienced, travel, accommodation, amazing food, and then there's the technical infrastructure. This is the breakdown that Artemis made, that I requested. I'm not really taking into account technical infrastructure because we're sort of trying to deal more with direct things that we've experienced maybe more directly. So this is to give you an idea of like the fee. This is more also to give a kind of institutional perspective that we're being provided for in other ways. Just like artists provide non-monetary rewards, i.e. cultural capital, to institutions when they work with them, it's a kind of, it's a process that goes back and forth. So, so we kind of figured out how much the festival is spending on each of us on average, which is 880 euros. Which I think it's really interesting, as I know there was some controversy at the beginning about there were complaints about the size of the fee. But if their fee were larger, there were other ways that the festival would have to have cut back, which is an ongoing challenge for an arts organization. But the point is that the thing that's always cut back on when expenses are too high is the artist fee. So the goal of wage certification is to treat the fee like subcontracted labor. Like you couldn't, if the janitor came in, I mean, this is really obvious. You would never say to the janitor or the graphic designer, I'm sorry, like we can't pay you. Do you still want to do it? That just wouldn't happen. So this is a way of, I think it's like a mind shift in the way, it's a way of thinking about the value of our labor and how to place a value on it. Should I stop there? Am I at 15?
Yeah, I guess, but if we want to have any kind of discussion,
yes,
then
okay.
Maybe a conclusion.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, can you just...
Yeah.
But this is obviously, maybe you not see it here. This budget is estimated that does not include overhead expenses such as staff salaries and rental costs.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, I would have explained all of this. It's just, it's so compressed, I can't.
Yeah, I guess you would need to possibly the whole panel on this.
Lisa, I have a question.
Yes.
What appeals to me in WAGE is that you're so focused. You have a topic, you have something you want to achieve. Maybe you broaden it a little bit in the course of the events, transparency. What I noticed with other platforms or organizations is that they want many things at the same time, which is of course very nice, but it could be, it takes a lot of energy, and it could be that in a year or a year and a half, it's disillusion. I wonder, in your short history, or it's not even so short, you're so focused, was there a temptation to widen your courses, and did you discuss it and really decide, no, this comes first?
I don't know. I don't think. I mean, like I said, the first 2 years were spent doing consciousness raising around the issue, but I think it became, because the work on the survey began after the first public meeting. So I don't think so. I mean, I think it was always really focused. Yeah. Yeah, and it's not that many people. That really helps, And
how many people are you, if you could?
Well, right now it's like essentially two co-organizers. I mean, it had been 4 people, but we're not. Yeah, we made the decision to actually not go horizontal, but we're thinking of it. I've said this a few times as like kind of concentric circles. So, not as a top-down thing, but as the co-organizers at the center of it, sort of guiding the organization with people helping in various capacities around that. So I think it really does make a difference. I mean, we've been working collaboratively for 4 years. It's really hard. It's really hard to write collaboratively, and it's like, we did that, so.
Who is paying you?
Nobody is paying us. Well, we get fees for speaking, and we put them in the bank, but we just formed a nonprofit so that we can raise money to pay ourselves, but to do wage certification. I mean also to redo the survey, we need to hire technical assistants. And yeah, I mean, we've been accused of becoming an institution, which I think is a ridiculous assertion, just because we're forming a nonprofit. To me, they're not related.
Here first.
Okay, I have a question, maybe not specifically to you, but to all participants. I work at an art institution, and we employ a lot of interns. How would you establish an amount of money an intern should get? A student, for example, who has almost no experience, but has an ability to work in a good way. And the comment, I would like to refer to this statement that you can treat an unpaid work as a kind of investment. You can do it, but it's based on a kind of an optimism, that you will be rewarded for that in future. And I'm not sure if we can afford this kind of optimism now in the times of crisis. Yeah.
Actually, I just wanted to speak to that a little bit. I mean, you guys should talk about the internship thing, but I just wanted to say, I mean, in New York, there are sort of like 3 spheres of exhibition opportunities and more, but the main ones are commercial galleries, nonprofits, and museums, even though museums are nonprofits. And I've lately been thinking about them in terms of time. So a commercial gallery is obviously this model of speculation, and it rewards artists in terms of future sales. So this is where the investment in future sales is really manifest. Museums reward artists in terms of past success. And nonprofits actually should reward artists in terms of the present. And I guess the point I'm trying to make, aside from that point, is that the more models of exhibition and the more exhibiting opportunities and spheres there are, the better it is. So you can afford to have like a speculative model, and you can afford to have a model that's based in the present. And I'm not, I don't know how it functions here specifically, but I think in New York that's actually a strength of the city.
In response to the question about internship, we developed, the counter guide to free labor in the arts was very much developed in discussions with interns who would, I would say probably half of the experiences were not bad. People were saying, hey, it's okay for us to work for free. I'm doing it just for a short period of time, etc. There are many other arguments why these are myths. But so in a sense, I guess what we tried to get to, there is a question of labor and the question of the national minimum wage and a legal basis to challenge that, at least in the UK. And there has been some court cases that kind of would enable an intern to claim back their money. But then there is also the question of learning. So if an internship is a process and a relationship of learning and of developing an experience, then it should be assessed, and an intern should be able to make demands. I guess for us is a question of thinking about it in the broader sense. If an intern is replacing a paid worker, as we have seen in the cultural sector with the cuts, but even before the cuts, then there is a serious problem because it undermines other workers within the organization. And there are sectors in the famous British creative industries where you have 60% of the workforce unpaid, and then only some people profiting. And I think that's a question of ethics within the workspace and redistribution of both cultural capital, but also material capital.
And I think just beyond the minimum wage, we more adhere to the London living wage, which is above the minimum wage, because actually the minimum wage isn't something you can live on. So we kind of work with that. But I think, this kind of like weighing of what's actually happening in the internship, and that has a lot to do, even in law, it has a lot to do with whether you can work the hours that you would like to work, whether you have to come in or don't, whether you have responsibilities you have to fulfill, and then those change depending on the nature of the organization. Like the fashion industry, for example, endlessly, supplies labor through internships, and the profits are actually quite extreme, and the level of responsibility that people are taking are very, very high. So in that industry, we might say something well above the London living wage, actually, because of the discrepancy.
So this was all one question.
Oh, do we have time for more questions?
No, we don't.
I think we have 3 minutes.
Come on.
The last word. No, it's better last question. We're still...
Loud and with the microphone.
2 questions. Actually, there was already 1 and 2 questions. Florian, you obviously really like to hold this stick, you know?
I'll try to make this quick. This is a question for Elise. In New York, I noticed that you were comparing or using a standard, the CARFAC fees, which are Canadian standards that work because funding in Canada is through the state, and and you don't. If you're an institution and you don't adhere to CARFAC fees, you won't get funding. But in New York, and I see how that could work in Europe as well. But in New York, where the state doesn't fund institutions, what is the incentive for an institution to be wage certified aside from shame or justice, or is there like a practical impetus?
Well, I think I just addressed the issue of the thing about CARFAC and funders, to say that that's true, that state funding, it comprises maybe 10% of an organization's budget, but there's a way in which funders, this is another platform that we have that I didn't get to, but there's a way that funders could make nonprofits accountable so that they don't renew funding unless they see canceled checks, essentially. It's so simple. All an organization has to do is just prove that they paid artists, and then they'll get their funding. And if they don't, if they can't, then they don't get their funding. So, again, it's a model based on self-regulation, and it definitely banks on organizations wanting to keep up with the Joneses. Like once Artist Space is certified, then, and it's already happening actually. We're probably going to wage certify 5 organizations at the same time, because hopefully there'll be a sense of shame for not being wage certified. I think WAGE has that kind of leverage now, but I know that's unusual. And that's one of our strengths. We're lucky to have that support.
Thank you very much.